Welcome and thanks for joining us. Let's get started.
From the front lines of violence prevention, digging into the details that matter. Get ready for a 15-minute fast-paced information download that will prepare you to ask the critical question. When disaster strikes, are we good? Now, here's Jim Bennett.
Welcome and thank you for joining us. We have Saul Jaeger with us today. Saul and I worked together many years ago back in the wonderful Silicon Valley. He retired after 23 years as a captain with the Mountain View Police Department, which is the second in command in the organization there. He holds a doctorate in human and organizational psychology, as well as a master's in emergency management. Saul, great to have you. Great to see you. Great to reconnect.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Jim. Thanks for having me. The
Oh,
fancy titles and everything. Wow.
yeah, well, I got to give the story, and it's great to have you here because I remember Saul when he was just starting as a police officer, and it was just great to see him wrap up his career that way. So awesome work, and now you're in the healthcare industry as well. So no cop retires and just ends it right there. There's always part two, and
We can't stop. We gotta stay being busy, I guess.
exactly. Now, I'm super proud of you. That is awesome stuff. So
Thank
let's kind of dive into this.
you.
I hear this all the time. If we create solid security systems and procedures, then all of a sudden the complaints start rolling in, right? Because even though people may say, "Hey, I feel safe and everything's good in my organization now," then it becomes but it's an inconvenience. Now all of a sudden I have to go through a different door. Now all of a sudden I have to check in. Now I have to wear an ID badge. Imagine that. And then on top of that, then you have management going, we've spent a lot of money on this.
Mhm.
What's going on with this? Kind of give me your take on that.
Yeah. So it's an interesting dichotomy, right? And you see it across industries. So I always look at it like when things are going really, really well, like when nothing's happening, then the question is always, well, why do we need you, right? Like from upper management, why do we need you? And then when things go bad, which they will, right, eventually,
Mhm.
then the question becomes like, well, why didn't you see this coming, right? And that's across. You can talk about the law enforcement world and policing. You can talk about that in security world and private organizations or whatever, but it's kind of like in any helping industry, right? Even in the medical field. So medical, policing, even the fire service that we kind of bag on all the time, right? And more, right?
Mhm.
Across the thing. It's because it's um like essentially a line item. It's a cost
Yeah,
center to an organization, and you're basically proving a negative
right.
all the time, right? So that like it's one of those things where the better you do your job, the less visibility there is for the need for your job.
Right.
So like the better the police do, the less crime there is, or the better the medical field does, the fewer people get sick. And
Right.
over time, then they're like, well, people are less sick. Why do we need doctors? Right? There's no fires. Why do we need firefighters?
Yeah.
Right? There's less crime. Why do we need cops? So you're kind of doing your job and then proving it out of the way. And that's
Right.
why I've come to sort of the realization that like no matter what it is in the policing world and growing up in that world, that's the beauty and the need of communication,
Yeah.
right? And and the same thing in security. Like I do behavioral threat assessment for a large healthcare hospital organization that's nationwide,
Right.
and we're constantly talking about. We'll probably get into this in the conversation, but we talk about workplace violence. It's underreported across industries. It doesn't matter whether it's healthcare, tech, doesn't matter. So we're talking about it constantly, and we're not talking about selling a program, but we're talking about processes and people and how to report, what to report, all these kind of things. So it begins to normalize a process.
Yeah,
And that's the
absolutely.
key.
Absolutely. No, I can totally see it. As in my introduction, I talked a little bit about you're truly damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I
Yeah.
think that is a great description. I think I got that from you. Not that you can coin that one because that's out there, but the reality is it really does come down to that. I want to focus for just a minute on threat assessment. But for all of those listening, I want to assure you that I'm not going to just focus on threat assessment because you may look at it and say, "Hey, that's not something we do. It's not even something we're focusing on." But I also want to introduce it then as something that maybe you should be. So many times what we see is we see an individual in the organization. Maybe they came from another organization where they had a behavioral threat assessment team. Maybe they went to a class, maybe they went to a Belanti class, right? And they got this great idea, this great training. They were sold on the value of it. But then they go to management and say, here's what I'd like to propose we do. And they try to sell it to them. But the response is, hey, nothing ever happens here. Why is this necessary? We haven't had a shooting. Where do we kind of go with giving advice on that of how to react to that?
Mm. That's such a rich question. There's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a
And it's
lot in that
tough,
one.
isn't it?
I mean,
It's tough.
for me, there's correlation doesn't equal causation, right? So
Yeah.
the scientist in me just kind of goes nuts when somebody says like, well, it hasn't happened here.
Yeah.
Um, whether that's luck or not, it kind of depends. And there's a in that world, there's the correlation causation kind of world. There's a lot of funny, interesting kind of things that happen with that. And without getting into a lot of detail, this is actually a fact.
Mhm.
When ice cream sales go up, so does violent crime, right? They're
That's a great
related.
fact. Yeah.
Yeah, they're statistically related.
Yeah.
What you're missing is the fact that warm weather is the connection, is the cause of that, right? There's really no causal connection between ice cream and violent crime, right? So, but the same could be said for like human beings drink water, and all human beings drink water, all human beings die. So therefore, drinking water kills you. Well, no, right? It's like
Right.
so that it's just not a good argument that it is. And it's the other part is like, hindsight's always 2020. We hear that all the time. And we look at these cases uh all the time like that. And I don't know how many people have, if you're an adult, you've had something happen where you were like, man, I really should have bought that insurance.
Right.
Darn it, I lost my suitcase, I got
Yeah.
into an accident, I whatever, right? I should have spent the extra little $30, $100, whatever, to get that insurance. And it's kind of a bit Captain Obvious kind of all the time here, but like security services are really about protecting the organization when something happens. And we talk
Yeah.
about, in the threat assessment world, we talk about the concept of left and right of boom,
Right.
that sort of concept. And so for those not familiar, boom is when something happens. Left of boom is when before something happens. Right of boom is when, I don't know where the camera's oriented, but my right is after something happens, right? So at the moment when something happens at boom, that's a security law enforcement, like first responder response, right? But left of boom is all the pre-work that's done, right? And
Yeah.
so that's the stuff that people are saying, like to your question before of like, what are you doing? What's the worth, right? That's the
Yeah.
stuff nobody sees. And
Yeah.
those are the things that are all the preventative stuff. And that's kind of what you're talking about now. They come to come back from an event and they say, we need a behavioral threat assessment team, right? Or it needs to be part of security. This is all the preventative work that happens before that. There's an incident that happens, reported, an assessment needs to be made, right? Those kind of things.
Yeah.
After an event, there's a lot of work that needs to be done as well. What's going to happen? Are there people, like, look at the shooting of the United Healthcare CEO? That has emboldened a lot of people to action, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of issues with that in my work right now, right? In a healthcare organization, um, we're concerned about potential future actors as well
Right.
with that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff around that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Well, folks, there you heard the great advertisement for getting your doctorate. That was awesome, man.
That's all we learned in
It's
doctorate school.
oh, is that it? Okay,
Yeah.
well, it paid off, so I'm sure you're left with a big tab, but nonetheless, great stuff. So both of us have served as PIO, so spokespersons for actually the same organization. I was just earlier than Saul,
Yep.
but we've both done that, and so we always had our radar on for the camera to turn towards us. There's an incident happens, the focus is the incident, right? And then there's that opportunity for the media to start asking questions, and not necessarily it came back to the law enforcement agency, but I want to take this more into private industry where something bad happens in that organization, in that facility, and that's the focus day one, or maybe hour one, hour two, or day two. All of a sudden it comes back to you and says, so, what did you do and not do? And how does that really kind of play out when you're kind of left holding nothing and you're standing there? I mean, just kind of your perspective on that, because what I want to be doing with this question here is really just kind of answering those questions for the decision makers of here's what happens if you don't, and here's what it looks like and what the damage is.
Yeah, I'll answer it in one word and then I'll explain it a little bit more. The one word is the big scary L word that any executive is nervous about, and that is litigation.
Mhm.
Um, that's what's pointing back at you with this whole thing. So, really, the blame game starts. That's where it begins, right? So the camera is looking at what happened at the incident, and then when it begins to turn around and starts looking at everything else that happens, again, blame begins, the legal battles start to happen, the scrutiny starts to happen. And that's in the threat assessment. I know we said we weren't going to talk too much about, but in the threat assessment world, one of the most important reasons behind this all is to have defensible processes,
Mhm.
and then not only having defensible processes, but following those defensible processes. So it's
Right.
those two things that are
Huge.
critical to have within an organization. So you can't just have them and then throw them on a shelf somewhere, right? It's
Right.
like having a battle plan and then just not using it, right? You have to have defensible processes that are industry standard and then actually use them, right? And
Yeah.
follow them. If you do that, you're in a good place for litigation and to be defended in a court. And again, that's kind of the argument for advanced planning, to have relationships ahead of time,
Yeah.
to have that training set up ahead of time, to be thinking about these things. And again, I always laugh that, threat assessment professionals and a lot of cops in general are kind of what we call CWOs, like your chief worry officers.
Right.
That's what I call them, right? We're always worried about everything, and freaking out and planning, and that's kind of it's one of the issues that we have. We're working on it, right? Therapy
Yeah.
maybe, but that's what you bring us in for, is to worry about all of this stuff. And that's it. You can't you have to have defendable and defensible processes.
Absolutely. A lot of times when I'm talking to various clients, and we certainly bring up the L word when I get the response of, Jim, it's never happened here. I'm not overly worried about it. And then certainly I can give this novel version of all these different locations by name that they've heard, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, that's right. Oh, that's a small place. Oh, that's in a very small town, right? You can do that, but one of the things that we many times have conversations about is the brand and the impact of the brand. And when I use the word brand, I'm talking big picture here. Because go back to my point of bringing up any organization where something's happening, just dropping the name, they know it. So there's forever that stigma, that identification as, and I hate to go all the way back, but talking about Columbine.
Yep.
I've had never heard of Columbine. I'm assuming you probably hadn't either prior to that event. And now we're talking, that's what, nearly 25 years ago, and yet it's a known thing. So I think brand impact is important too. Obviously, number one's life safety. I don't want to diminish that. That's number one. Property protection, avoiding litigation, all right up there. But the reality is, it does affect your brand and it changes your organization, right?
Oh yeah, and for sure, and that's a priority in in an organization, right? In a private or a even a nonprofit organization.
Yeah.
Brand is, I mean, obviously safety of your people and
Yeah.
your customers, right? Depending on who that is probably number one, and your
Right.
assets and all of those kind of things as well. But yeah, I mean, without you could bankrupt an entire company just by a brand hit that's big
Right.
enough.
Yeah.
And we could all, I mean, I just said United Healthcare shooting, and everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And I
Absolutely.
mean, marketing is marketing. If I said the Nike swoosh, you just saw exactly what I'm talking about, right? And it's
Right.
not because everybody is a huge Nike fan, it's because you've seen that logo. Again, human behavior, right? You've seen that logo a million times
Right.
because it's been pushed on top of you. Again, it goes back to communication plans, which can be used for good things, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Which, we in a communication plan, that for all you leaders out there, doesn't mean I send one email and everybody will follow my direction because I sent one email. A communication plan is washing an idea over people consistently, intentionally, through multiple ways of doing it. So emails, pointing to a website,
Hmm.
hard copies of things, poster boards, presentations, be creative, right? And all the time, a lot. It's
Yeah.
not a sales pitch, but they'll remember it. So it's a culture thing, and you're normalizing a process.
Yeah. Absolutely. So let's take a minute here to just kind of transition beyond threat assessment for everyone that was listening. And I promised them we would get more into this. And sorry, folks, you're probably going to have to be in the squad room to get the rest of this story, but we're going to start touching on it here for just a minute. When we look at the safety and security of your employees, your organization. We do many things. So there's the tech side of it, there's the hardware side of it, there's the procedural and the policy. But when we look at that, what advice would you have for an organization that's totally lost in the forest? Like, I don't know what we have, I don't know where we start to best protect our employees. Where do they kind of start? Where does that conversation begin?
There's a couple things that I would start. One lesson again from the military and from law enforcement, right? Slow is fast. So don't make any decisions rash, right? Understand what you're doing first.
Yeah.
I would also do an audit of what you actually have already. You may have security people in your organization already that
Hmm.
know this stuff. You may have people in your organization that think they know this stuff.
Right.
Um, One is more dangerous than the other.
Yeah.
And so you need to do a strong sort of understanding of what you already have and what you already need. Um, and then also understand your risk tolerance of your organization as well.
Right.
So understanding what is important, what cogs are important within your world, right? So in the healthcare world is a little bit different than maybe in the like a film industry, right, or
Yeah.
entertainment world. So there may be politics, there may be medical things, there may, it all sort of depends on what it is. Once you have kind of an understanding, it doesn't even have to be real clear, but an understanding of those kind of things, I would reach out to experts in the field, and shout out to ATAP,
Yeah.
and other organizations that have the experts out there to talk about what you need. Do you need a team of 100 behavioral threat assessment professionals with clinical psychologists and like Los Angeles's threat management unit, or the BAU from the FBI? Do you need something like that if you're a small printing press company?
Right.
Probably not, right? You need to throw millions of dollars at this, right? Or do you just need like maybe a consultant that you can call if you guys have an issue? Um,
Right.
so understand that. And then also really, really important is to understand the regulatory um, uh, system around you.
Right.
What is necessary, because there are some industries that are required to have a workplace violence program,
Hmm.
um, and some that are required to have a behavioral threat assessment component as part of the workplace violence program. And those are things that are like government, contracting, K through 12, healthcare, higher ed,
Right.
and there's a number of those. So if you work directly there or contracting or even some that are adjacent to those, I can almost guarantee you that uh, you have to have a workplace violence program
Right.
set up, and in that there's a behavioral threat assessment component. So, when things are going great and everything's sunshine and butterflies, it's not such a big deal and nobody cares. But when things go bad, and that, like you talked about, that camera points internally,
Mhm.
and you don't have that, then you're going to be dealing with regulatory issues, fines, who knows, right? They'll throw the book at you, and
Yeah.
then it's going to become a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great answer. And that's what I was getting to is as a leader in an organization, you're looking at what's good, what's bad, and what you need to do to best protect your employees for all of those reasons. The personal safety side of it, the property protection, the avoidance of litigation, and certainly the brand. And so that was a great lead in. I should probably do like a 5-second commercial here to make my Belanti Net team happy. And that is, you just set me up for that, is give Belanti.net a call or go to Belanti.net, because we have the experts to provide that assistance for you in identifying what your needs are, what the risks are, et cetera. And Saul didn't even know that was coming. But hey, thanks for giving me that lead, and that was great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, I hate to do this. We are out of time, but the good news is you can hear part 2 of this conversation by going into the locker room. The way you get there is to join the Good Squad on our Patreon site. So, the Good Squad on Patreon. And there you can see the rest of my conversation with Saul. Saul, thank you very much for joining me today. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks for having me, and we'll see everybody there.
Absolutely. And let's go ahead and dive into the squad room. And don't forget to ask that important question before disaster strikes. Are we good?